you've watched Bridgerton, you may remember scenes in which the characters were introduced to the queen, they were wearing those fancy dresses, and they would be introduced formally to the British court. This is actually what the entire series opens up with, everyone getting ready to visit the court, and Daphne gets introduced to the court. And I remember watching it and thinking, wow, these dresses are actually really well done. Except they're French. They're all wearing French-style court dresses to a British court. And this happens a lot with period dramas that are set in that particular time period and that feature a British court. And every time I see it, I'm like, fair. I mean, the viewers are not ready for what was actually worn back then at the British court. When you were being introduced to court, or when you were around the queen or in the court, you would wear your most expensive, most opulent dress. In most cases in 18th century that also meant wide hoops. In 1780s, the fashionable silhouette started shifting a little. Not only did the hoops go out of fashion gradually, but also the waistline started raising in the 1790s, and everything just started shifting upwards. By late 1790s, the waist has raised significantly. Now in that case, you're probably thinking, wait, so if that was the fashionable silhouette, surely the court dress would gradually change with the fashion. Yes and no. Queen Charlotte was not a fan of the French due to the politics at the time. She was not a fan of French fashions, and she was also sort of a traditionalist. She didn't like changes that much. So she, in terms of court dress, desperately held on to whatever was fashionable years before. So all of the rules of the traditional court dress were still upheld even though the silhouette has changed, and that was the case until her death in 1818 or even 1820s, when the King George IV was like, we need to chill with the hoops, guys. This is ridiculous. That period, that whole combination of the massive wide hoops together with the really slim raised waistline resulted in what I consider to be fashion history's biggest atrocity. The late 18th, early 19th century court dress worn in the British court. When you look at it from the top, you get a really fashionable hairstyle, very elegant feathers, turbans, tiaras, you know, the money is there, sexy bosoms in bodices with raised waistlines, and then what is this? You get the massive hoop skirts. This silhouette had no business being this funny. Honestly, I still can't get over it. So, of course, I had to recreate it. Let's break down this whole look. Before we get into that though, this video is sponsored by June's Journey. You probably know about it if you watch this channel. June's Journey is a hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s, and in the game the main character June is trying to solve a family mystery. She's trying to find out who killed her sister, and then she goes on lots of different adventures because of that. In each scene you unravel a new piece of information. Every now and then you meet new stylish characters. Everything is Art Deco 1920s vintage style, so I mean, you and I have that in common, baby. Honestly, it's one of those games that is so relaxing to play, but it also like keeps your energy up because you kind of want to win. There is a lot you can do also. Apart from solving the puzzles, you can also decorate your tiny little island, collect stickers, participate in challenges. You can have a club with your friends where you all collect points for your clubs. The game is available for free on mobile devices, on Android, on iOS. It is also available on desktop through Facebook and Amazon. So use the link in the description to download the game for free. Thank you! The biggest problem with recreating a look like that, or even researching it, is the fact that, as far as we know, there are no extant dresses like this surviving anywhere. They're not in the museum. Maybe there's a dress hiding in someone's attic at the moment, but as far as we know, those dresses were slowly reworked into different silhouettes as time went on, because the court gowns were made of the best, most expensive fabric, and people back then were a lot more sustainable, and they would rework and redo and resew things a lot, and it wasn't that big of a faux pas to just change the silhouette of the dress instead of get a new one. If you spend that much money on embroidery and fabric, you would just sort of reuse it. People would just adjust the fit of the original dress as fashion changed, which is why we don't really get to see dresses like these surviving. And I'm assuming it's also because it was a short period of time when it was fashionable and it was a lot of fabric, so it was very tempting to make something else out of it. So the dresses slowly got de-yassified. They probably ended up as one of these instead. The other problem is that because it was a style that was limited to a few people, like it was literally the very richest of rich in one of the richest empires in the world back then, it was the top of the top of the top. And because of that, the target demographic for whoever was designing those dresses was probably like 5 people. Okay, probably a little more, but it was just a very small group of people that wore those. So the court dress was not really featured in fashion magazines, it wasn't really featured in fashion plates, because there was just no use. No one's gonna make it to court anyway just because they make a dress like this. There is a limited number of fashion plates showing the dress, and even less fashion plates showing the back of the dress or any sort of detail in terms of construction. So it's pretty tough to wrap your head around what exactly was going on. My main points of information was researched by a historian and collector, Christina Barreto Lancaster, and a book from the period called A Book Explaining the Ranks and Dignities of British Society. And the book is doing exactly that. It just explains to you different positions, ranks in a British society at the time, such as the difference between a Lord Chancellor and a Duke and a Viscount, all the posh pricks. It talks about military ranks, it talks about the clergy, and finally it talks about court dress. It explains court dress. The court dress for ladies is now distinguished only by the hoop, lappets, and full ruffles. For the mantua is now made exactly like any other open gown, and differently in shape before, according to the fashion of the year. The petticoat also is plain or trimmed, according to the fancy of the wearer. The most general form is the one followed in the plate. Of late, it has been more the fashion to have the petticoat, both the drapery and the under part, of the same color as the gown, but a colored drapery over a white petticoat prevailed for many years, and the drapery was even often a different color from the gown. Velvet, satin, silk, crepe, and gauze are the only materials allowed for ladies' court dresses. The lappets are sometimes of black lace, but oftener the same as the ruffles, of fine lace or blonde. Court dresses are trimmed and often embroidered with gold and silver, and artificial flowers are much used for ornamenting the petticoat. Feathers are not reckoned a necessary part of a court dress, but young ladies seldom go without them. If this all sounded like black magic to you, yeah, I didn't know what it all meant either. So let's just break it down. The main part of the dress, as I mentioned, could be made of silk, taffeta, silk satin, or silk velvet. It was then decorated with embroidery, trimmings, usually gold or silver, and artificial flowers, all sort of decoration. It featured a 3-yard long narrow train that was attached to the bodice, and it could be pinned up as well, just so it's not sort of dragging behind you. There was a separate skirt that was also called a petticoat in some of the descriptions, and it could either be made of the same fabric as the bodice and the train or of something completely else. On top of the skirt there would be another layer of decorative drapery, sometimes also of the same fabric, sometimes that would be wide see-through fabric, sometimes it was a contrasting fabric. And this could be decorated anywhere between just having a simple embroidery or fringe at the hem to being covered completely with embroidery or other sort of decoration. Now, the massive skirts had slits on the sides similar to those 18th century skirts. If you're familiar with the construction of 18th century skirts, you basically have a front panel and a back panel, and you tie the back of the skirt first around your waist, and then you tie the front of the dress around your waist. Simple as that. So that creates slits on the side of the skirt that could be used as an access point to your pockets. And the openings to those pockets in court dresses would be adorned with 2 rows of lace. There was generally a lot of lace used throughout the dress, and those were like the mandatory elements of the court court dress. Not only the pockets opening, but also a little tucker of lace around your neckline. It could be anywhere from like an actual wide panel of lace adorning the neckline or a tiny one stitched to the neckline. And you would wear short sleeves anywhere between, let's say, this to your elbow, and those would also be adorned with lace at the opening of the sleeve, which I think personally was a remnant of 18th century engagements that were worn with court dresses at the time. Similarly, you would also have lappets, as mentioned before, in your hair. Those were just narrow pieces of lace attached to your hair. Again, something that was originating in earlier 18th century when that was regularly worn. So a lot of the elements were just fossilized 18th century trends combined with the hottest Regency fashion. White silk stockings would be worn as well with white shoes. Those would be showing a little bit because the dresses were not always completely floor length. They would be a little shorter than that. And for the accessories, only white kid gloves and a fan were allowed. I didn't know that when I went to the ball and I dragged my reticule around with me. Such a faux pas, absolutely disgusting. And apart from the traditional lace lappets hanging from the back of your head would also be adorned with feathers. The book mentions that it wasn't mandatory, but most of the ladies did it anyway. And most of the fashion plates confirmed this. And then on top of the feathers, not literally, because the feathers were actually on top, but on top of the feathers, the ladies would also wear different sort of stuff on their heads. It could be a turban, it could be a bandeau, it could be a ribbon. And there would also simultaneously be some tiaras involved, or jewelry involved, or combs involved, somewhere in the hair. So there was a lot happening on the ladies' heads. And considering the court members were not allowed to sit down in the presence of the royal, I mean, that sounds like a tension headache to me, not gonna lie. It was a lot. So here's what I did construction-wise when I finally got around to making the dress. First of all, I needed hoops, and I couldn't be bothered making my own ones. A whole project was a massive undertaking anyway, so I just gave up on that. I just bought some generic 18th century wide hoops on Etsy, and I added shoulder straps because otherwise there would be no way of keeping them in the right spot right beneath my boubage, because there is no way they would just drop right down to my waist, which is like a meter above the floor because my waist is really low. So to try out the skirt pattern, I decided to try it out on a petticoat first and then use it as a mock-up sort of. So that's what I did. Okay, here's the petticoat, and it completely doesn't make sense when it's lying like that. This is half of it. No, this is a quarter of it. This is half of the front, let's say, and this is the bottom. So it doesn't make sense, but when you gather this side, wait, let me do it with my sock. When you gather this side, that way you get that side volume for the hoops, right? Okay, let me do it this way. And then the bottom is flat. Does that make sense? This is one of the panels folded in half. You can sort of see my diagram, my pattern, if you will. For the skirt. I decided to actually make this side shorter because it doesn't need to be that long. The petticoat is clearly too long, so I made it 130. This is centimeters, by the way, I'm not insane. One half is cut out, so I'm moving on to the next one. I constructed the skirt the way I would do with 18th century skirts, pleating it the way it was pleated back then, and making sure that I can tie the back and the front around my waist to leave the slits open, but I actually made the front and the back overlap a little, so it wasn't that easy to access the pockets, so I just gave up on that because I didn't have any time. I will fix that one day because I really want to like put my hands in the hoops and look like a plasma TV. But also construction-wise, the sides had to be much longer to accommodate for the hoops. So if you ever plan on doing that, keep that in mind. Then I also made the train. By the way, I'm not using actual silk for this because that will cost me like $1 million approximately, so I'm just using some synthetic taffeta that I thought looked really good. Alright, I took the fabric, folded it in half, sewed it on one side, closed it, I pressed it on the other side, and I'm also gonna sew it there so it looks like it's made from 2 pieces, because this train is supposed to be self-lined, meaning the same fabric that is the outer fabric is also gonna be the lining, so I just did this little trick. So now I'm sewing over the other edge. The way I pleated the top of the train was based on this one fashion plate where we get to see the back finally, and it's not a coincidence that the pleats are very reminiscent of the 18th century Watteau style pleats that were featured in robe à la française and robe volante and other types of early 18th century dresses. At this point, I did all that and I gave up on the dress because I thought there's no way I'm gonna get it done, and I got overwhelmed and I stuffed it in my wardrobe for almost a year. Until this year, I was debating on what to wear to this historical ball that I was going to, and I didn't have any ideas, and the time was running, and I was getting stressed, and I don't know why, but I just pulled it out of the wardrobe, and I realized that I had done much more than I thought I had. Like, basically all I had to do was make the bodice, attach the train to it, and make the drapery and add the decoration. So it didn't sound like a lot, honestly. Now, I was in a rush, I was on a tight deadline, so I didn't actually film myself making the rest of the dress. It wasn't that interesting anyway. Let's just say it was fun. I had to utilize my door to construct the drapery because I didn't have a sewing dummy. I decorated the hem of the petticoat with a gold fringe, and I used the same fringe to decorate the drapery, and I had about this much left over, which I think means I'm the chosen one. I also used black net for the drapery. I was debating on it. I wanted to make it white because it made more sense, but I was really intrigued by this one fashion plate with like black elements, and I really liked the color contrast, so I just went for black, even though there isn't that many images of them using black in dresses like this. But then it was polyester anyway, so I don't think they would care. And I also decorated the bodice with a black and gold tape to sort of match the drapery. So as I said, I ran out of time to make proper skirt openings, or rather to fix the openings that I already had. So I did make fake lace decoration that was supposed to be on top of the skirt openings, and it was supposed to be pinned on the dress after it was put on, which worked kind of well. Like, it only fell apart like once or twice during the ball, but I also scratched my arm with one of the pins and it's still showing, like right here. Hello? So I basically gave myself permanent damage because I was too lazy to finish the dress. Now, during the ball, I was actually only wearing 2 petticoats out of all the petticoats that I could wear because it was just so heavy. The whole dress is hanging from your shoulders. The hoops are hanging from your shoulders, and then all of the petticoats are resting on the hoops. And then the train is attached to the bodice, which also hangs from your shoulders. So it's a lot of weight on shoulders as weak as mine. And when I first tried it on, I was actually 90% sure I'm gonna have to change during the ball because I will not last long in a dress that heavy. So I only wore 1 or 2 petticoats during the actual ball, which made the hoops show a little, which I'm not happy about. But a dress like this would probably not be worn to dancing anyway, so I guess for standing it's okay. But it was actually super fun to wear. It was so much fun. I felt like a fridge. But the flexible hoops made it really easy for me to get past people or just squeeze the whole thing up. And the train was not much of an inconvenience either when it was just tied up like this. The only problem was I couldn't tie it up on my own because it kept falling apart. So once a lady was all dressed up in her court gown, court dress, you name it, here is what happened. I'm quoting the book again. When they're saying they mean like female court members. Since the king has gone so much seldomer to court, they have been presented first to the queen at the common drawing room and to the king at the birthday following. And those invited by Her Majesty to the entertainments at Windsor have been presented to His Majesty there. In that case, they are not in court dresses, but the ceremony is the same. On them being named to the king by the lord of the bedchamber, they make a low curtsy and he salutes them, but their right hand glove should be off, as if they intended to take his hand to kiss. To Her Majesty, the ceremony of presentation for ladies is different according to the rank. All under the rank of Right Honourable kiss the Queen's hand, making so low a curtsy as to have almost the appearance of kneeling. She salutes those who have that rank, though they equally have their glove off. People are presented on different occasions. On first coming into the world, which young ladies usually do about 17 or 18, on their marriage or any change of name, on going abroad or to Ireland, or to an appointment to any situation about their majesties or the royal family. I think it's fascinating that people that were the richest people alive at the time wore things like this, and they couldn't say a thing because the queen demanded them to do it. I think it's so funny because I'm 100% sure all of the ladies were like, I actually hate this. I look like Dor. And then they couldn't do anything about it. That's Queen's orders, baby. I think it's hilarious, to be honest. That's it. That was really fun to wear. I have a soft spot for these dresses, mainly because they're so ugly. Be honest, if the queen asked you to wear something like this, would you do it? Or would you be like, you know what, take my title. Take my title. I'm out. I'm out. I'm not doing it. I have a cottage in the countryside. Perfectly fine with that. This is too much. Anyway, thanks for watching and bye! Also, don't forget to download June's Journey using the link in the description. Cheers!